Hey everyone, it's Austin and welcome back to the channel. Today I have a special video for you guys. I have a lot of friends that don't know much about chess. I want to teach you guys how to play chess for super beginners. For this video, I'm going to assume that you know the most basic rules of chess. I'm going to assume that you know how the pieces move, and basically that's really it. Okay, so let's get into it. All right, everybody. So here we have the starting position. So I want to break down the board, the pieces, the game of chess, the phases of the game, and then come back at the very end and discuss how to get better, how to actually win, and how to leverage this awesome website, chess.com, to get better at chess. So in the starting position, we have the white pieces that go first and the black pieces go second. And you can see there are coordinates around the outside. Now, the vertical rows are called files, the horizontal rows are called ranks, and you already know how the pieces move, but there are piece values associated. So each pawn is worth 1 point. The minor pieces, as they're called, the knights and bishops, are worth 3 points. The rooks are worth 5 points, and the queen is worth 9 points, meaning the pawn is worth less than the minor piece, worth less than the rooks, worth less than the queen. And of course, your king being most valuable, don't get checkmated. We'll talk about that later. So let's jump into the a little bit more complicated rules of the game of chess. So we have en passant. The first time that I ran into this, I thought that there was somebody hacking chess.com and that this was a complete mistake. It was not. So when white is moving their pawn up the board, now suddenly black is able to move their square or move their pawn from the starting position up 2 squares. And if they do that to try to get around white's pawn, now suddenly white can take this en passant, or French for in passing. So this is a legal move. This is a rule of chess. And let's move on. So there's also castling. This is how you get your king to safety most commonly. So let's say that we're going through a normal game, and in this position, after black's move, white is legally allowed to castle. So when there are no pieces between your king and your rook, you're able to move your king over 2 squares, and your rook comes to the other side on the inside of the king. So that looks like this, and it makes a special little noise on chess.com, but it's castling, and it is very important. Another example is technically if the queen moves out of the way, now there's no pieces on the queen side between the king and the rook as well. So you technically can castle after black's move. You can castle queen side as well. And the way that that's notated, as you can see over here, is castling king side is 2 O's, castling queen side is 3 O's. Again, very important to be able to get your king to safety. So at the very beginning of the video, we talked about the 3 phases of the chess games. There are openings, there are middle games, and there are end games. Not every single game is going to experience all 3 phases. You can blow your opponent off the board in the opening and they can resign. You can checkmate your opponent in the middle game. Let's define these real quick and then move into them. So the opening is the very beginning phase of the game where you are developing your pieces, you're controlling the center of the board, and you're castling. And then usually after your minor pieces are developed, your king is castled, then it's generally considered the middle game. The middle game is where all of your kind of plans and strategies are going to take place most of the time. You're going to try to build attacks, you're going to defend yourself, and then you're trading pieces along the way, and suddenly it reaches a point where there are very few pieces left on the board. Pawns are becoming more and more important because you can promote them, and your king can get active because there's less pieces. It's in less danger. That's when it's considered the end game. So let's talk about opening a little bit. So before we go through the moves, I want to give a general framework for what the rules and the ideas of any opening are. You want to develop your pieces towards the center of the board to control the center of the board. Your pieces are going to be the best that they can be when they are in the center of the board. They control the most squares, and they just frankly do the most when they're towards the center. So a lot of beginners will, try to develop their knights to the edge like this. But off the bat, that's a lot worse because your knight is going to control less squares here than it will here. And you can kind of see already why you need to start developing your pieces towards the center. Very small illustration. Anyway, the most common opening in chess is e4, moving the king's pawn forward 2 squares to develop, to control the center of the board. Black responds in a symmetrical way, and then immediately white attacks that pawn. It goes knight f3, and we're attacking this. Black needs to respond, so they defend with the knight as well. White plays bishop c4 to develop their pieces towards the center. Again, I'm going to say that a million times so that way you guys can keep understanding me. Black responds in a symmetrical way, and I'm just going to play the rest of the moves out. But it's going to be developing their minor pieces and castling. This is a lot of times in chess called doing your chores. Before you go trying to create a massive attack on your opponent, you got to do your chores, especially when you're a beginner. You got to develop your pieces. You need all 4 of your minor pieces out and your king castled before you try doing anything super fancy. So here, white and black perfectly symmetrically, which this will probably never happen to you. It's never happened to me. They have all 4 of their minor pieces developed, and their kings are castled, and now they're ready for the middle game. So I just wanted to throw this in there to illustrate the idea that there obviously is not going to be symmetry. So this game begins with the opening that we just looked at. This is called the Italian game. But immediately white castles where black can't, so there's no symmetry. And then white starts building for a center pawn push, and they just start maneuvering their pieces to the king's side, and this is kind of reaching the point where their pieces are developed. Sure, white's light squared bishop is on its home square, but this is what I would say is generally considered the middle game. So let's talk about middle games. Now, middle games, I would say most commonly for beginners, they're going to say, I don't know what to do after I develop my pieces. I don't have a plan for the middle game. Now, most commonly, your middle game, my cat is meowing at me. Most commonly, your middle game ideas are going to stem from what openings you play. So let's say, stop it. He wants attention so bad. Most commonly, your middle game ideas are going to come from your openings. And let's say that you pick an opening that you want to play, which is really important, by the way. You don't want to try to learn every single opening. Then you can also watch some YouTube videos and see what the most common middle game ideas are in the Italian, in the Roy Lopez, and you'll learn all these names. But that's not really the point. I wanted to give this game to illustrate. I play the Caro Kann, that's what it's called, with the black pieces against e4. So that's what this position looks like. This is the exchange Caro Kann. I'm being a good noodle. I'm developing my minor pieces. I got my bishop attacked, and my bishop is worth less than that pawn, so I have to do something here. So I made an equal trade, 3 for 3, and now I've castled. White goes here. Now this move is a mistake already because I understand the middle game ideas of the Caro Kann are that you really want to target this d4 pawn. In certain situations, the d4 pawn in the Caro Kann is going to be very weak. So you may be able to win it if your opponent plays inaccurately. So that doesn't really happen a whole lot at my level anymore, but it happened a whole lot when I was a beginner, and it won to me winning a lot of games just from that simple idea. But generally speaking, for the sake of discussion, white wants to develop his knight to d2 instead of c3, so that way you can reinforce this pawn with another pawn, but they didn't do that. So in this position, the pawn is actually hanging and you can take. White is already enjoying an advantage in this position. What did I say? White? Black is already enjoying an advantage in this position. So that's an example of a middle game idea. Let's go to one of my other openings. I played the London with white. So that looks a little bit like this, where you have this awesome pawn triangle that's super solid. Your light square bishop can see through the pawn chain. Your dark square bishop is on the outside of the pawn chain. And your knights are supporting each other. And most importantly, in the London, middle game ideas and opening ideas are you really need to work on controlling these two squares. So another very common motif in the London for the middle game is you're going to jump your f3 knight into e5. And this is how you're going to help secure this square. From this square, your knight targets some very important squares on the king side. If the king, after we castle, the middle game ideas of the London are very straightforward. You have all of your pieces pointing towards the king side. You're going to try to develop an attack and you're going to try to checkmate the black king. So that's another example of a middle game plan. So in middle games is where you're going to see most commonly examples of tactics. And I also wanted this guide to include, he's over there. My cat is hanging out in a box over there, just having the time of his life. Oh, what it would be like. He probably doesn't know anything about chess though, loser. So in middle games, you're going to come across all this jargon in the chess world of like different names for different things. So I kind of want to tackle some of that here. Tactics are really forcing moves in positions that are going to win material, lose material, give checkmate, or completely change the course of the game. So one of the most common things you're going to hear about is the pin. So we've already seen this position a couple times, the Italian game. White continues developing. Now this move is called a pin. White's bishop is pinning the black knight to the queen. It's when a lesser value piece is being pinned to a more value piece. This piece cannot move is the general idea. That piece cannot move, otherwise greater danger will come. So if black were to move the knight, immediately the bishop sees the queen. The bishop's only worth 3. The queen's worth 9. Easy choice. Go ahead and take this. Black recaptures, white castles, and immediately white already has a 6-point material advantage going into the middle game. And likely that'll be decisive. There's also a fork. So, like a fork in the road, it can go 2 different directions. So again, very common position, the Italian game. Now, when black defends with 2 knights first, white has the opportunity to play this opening that, I'm not kidding, is called the fried liver attack. So in the fried liver attack, white exploits the fact that the 2 weakest pawns on the chessboard are the f2 and the f7 pawn. Why are they the most fragile? Because they are only defended by the king. So immediately in this position, white is threatening to take this pawn. If black doesn't do anything about it, lazily tries to attack this knight, immediately white can take this pawn. And even worse, white is forking these pieces. So this is generally a double attack. You're attacking 2 different things, and you're guaranteed to win material. It's usually like when you're forking the king and the queen, or forking the king and the rook, or forking the queen and the rook. And all of these pieces are worth more than the knight. So you're guaranteed to win material. So in this position, white can't take this. All they can do is move their queen to not lose their queen. So they do that. White takes the rook. Even if this knight somehow gets trapped and isn't able to get out, white is still up material. They got the pawn and the rook. If they lose the knight, they're still going to be up 3 points of material. Likely that's enough to be decisive. So now we've got the discovered check. This was something that surprised the hell out of me the first time that I saw it. And the idea is that a piece is lined up against the king, but there's something blocking it. But that thing can move, right? So the knight moves, and immediately a check is discovered against the king. So very, very simple to understand, but I didn't really think about this when I first started playing chess. There's also the double check, which is a form of discovered check most of the time, where in this situation, when the knight moves away, both the knight and the queen attack the king. Now, this is probably one of the most forcing types of moves in chess, because with a normal check, another piece can block, the king can move, maybe that piece can be captured. There are a lot of different choices that can be made with a normal check. With a double check, the choices are very limited. Your king has to move. It's attacked by two pieces. You can't take this piece, you can't take that piece. No matter the situation, you have to move the king. It's attacked twice. So we talked about some openings, some tactics in the middle game, some middle game ideas. Now let's talk about endgames. So like I said at the beginning, endgames are your passed pawns. Your pawns are going to become super, super powerful, super important. And that's because when the pawn gets to the rank of the opponent, they are able to promote to any piece that they want. So most of the time, that's a queen. So suddenly, this 1 point pawn can turn into a 9 point queen, and that's 98% of the time enough to win a game. So there are endgame techniques that are very well documented, where this is beyond, like, with no chance for black, this is completely winning for white. There is nothing that black can do if white plays perfectly to win this game. And I'm not going to explain the technique, but it looks like this. And white is able to slowly but surely guide their pawn to promotion. And you need to learn at some point how to checkmate with just king and queen against king, because otherwise you might screw it up. It's very easy to screw it up. So checkmate, we haven't really talked about defining it yet, but it's how you win the game. And checkmate is when the enemy king is attacked but also can't do anything about it. Basically, it's going to be captured is the idea. So it's attacked, the piece that is attacking it can't be taken, and the king can't be moved. So white or black plays this. How does white go to checkmate the black king with just a queen? The easiest way is to move in knight's opposition to the king. So if you pretend that this king is a knight, then it would control this square. So that's the square that we're going to move to with the queen. And wherever black moves, if it's here, go there. If it's here, go here. We're just going to follow it with the queen. And the idea is that laterally, the queen creates this little box, and we're going to shrink that box all the way until it's in the corner of the board or on the side of the board. So we do that, but now it's a special situation. The king's in the corner, or if the king went here, in either case, you want to cut the king off. If your king is on, let's say, this side of the board, your queen needs to be on this file. And now the king is restricted to this one file. So let's see what it looked like in that position where the king's in the corner. We go here. Now the king is restricted to just these three squares. And at this point, we bring the king in for reinforcements. Now in this position, I would say this is the most common checkmating construction that you're ever going to see. It's when the queen comes and is directly lateral to the king. The queen controls this square, this square, this square, this square. The king can't move, and the king can't take the queen because it's defended by the king. This is checkmate. And that is how you win, is giving checkmate. At some point you have to do it, otherwise, if your opponent resigns, that's technically a win, but you still got to learn how to do it at some point. And you're probably thinking, Austin, that's pretty technical. Why do I need to learn how to checkmate with just king and queen versus king? And that's because of rules like stalemate. So there are ties in the game of chess. They're called draws, and neither player wins. And you want to avoid this if you're in a completely winning situation. but it can happen. And the way that stalemate happens is when the opponent has no legal moves. They literally can't make a move. So what would that look like in this situation where you're trying to checkmate with king and queen? Let's say white doesn't really know what to do, and they're just moving their pieces towards the king, trying to control squares. They step up to e6. Excuse me. Suddenly it's black's move, but the queen controls these 4 squares, and the king controls this square. Black can't go anywhere. This is stalemate, and this would be a draw. So, it totally sucks when you're completely winning a position and you're ready to win, but then suddenly, nope, sorry, it's a draw. That's why you got to learn this stuff. So another way that it's very common for beginners to checkmate is called ladder mate. It's where you get a queen and a rook, or a queen and a queen, and you just build a ladder down the board, just slowly cutting off one file at a time, one rank at a time, until you're able to take away all the squares from the opponent's king. So if you're doing it with a queen and a rook, it's very important that the queen is on the side furthest from the king, so that way your queen defends your rook. Otherwise, if it's the other way around, your opponent can come up and take your queen. So what it looks like, if you just play it out, you just kind of go where they're diagonal to each other all the way down the board until suddenly you go here and the king has no moves and it's under attack, so it is checkmate. So I would be remiss if I did not discuss the 4-move checkmate, the scholar's mate. You're going to see this a lot as a beginner. You're going to have a lot of people playing white that are trying to cheese you. Do not fall for this. I'm going to show you how. So we're used to e4, e5 by now, right? Now let's say that white goes queen h5. This is very scary looking, right? This queen, it's the most powerful piece in the position, and it's getting all up in your grill. It's kind of freaky, right? So you don't want to overreact. Just take a second, think about it. The only thing that the queen's doing right now is attacking this pawn. This pawn isn't defended by anything, but like this square is defended, this square is defended. We're not really concerned. So you should play knight c6. Now they're probably going to go bishop to c4, and now this is super scary because now they have those 2 pieces lined up on the f7 square. We were just talking about how f7 is so vulnerable. Now, I would say most commonly, you can find a game where I have fallen for this. Most commonly, people are going to go knight f6 because they think that they're developing like they're supposed to, but at the same time, they're attacking the queen. Has to be a good move, right? It doesn't defend f7. That's checkmate, and you lose in 4 moves. Like I said, I've fallen for it. I don't want you guys to fall for it. Learn from my mistakes, right? So what should you play? The most common move is g6, and this attacks the queen and disconnects the queen's vision of f7. Most of the time, they're going to drop back to f3, so that way they can regain vision of the f7 square, block it again with knight f6, and then from there, you've really staved off most of the threats. So just continue developing as normal. Any chance that you can get to develop with tempo is what this is called, where you're developing a piece, but at the same time you're attacking a piece of greater value. It basically means that you got a free move because now they have to move this piece. So it's developing with tempo. It's very helpful when you're able to do it. You develop, you castle, and now you actually have the opportunity to play a normal game versus getting checkmated in 4 moves. So those are the most common things that I wanted to show you. Now let's talk a little bit about how you can improve at chess using chess.com. So I am a chess.com affiliate, meaning that if you click the link in my bio or in my description and you create an account and you actually pay for a membership, I would see a portion of that. So any time that you guys do that, it's much appreciated. It helps support the channel. However, that's not the reason why I'm showing you chess.com. The reason that I'm showing it to you is because I think that it is a wonderful website that has a lot of fantastic tools to grow in the game of chess. I mean, I have used this website basically entirely by itself to reach the level that I have. I'm not a master or anything. I'm not even an expert, but I've learned a couple things about chess through the website. It's very helpful. So let's walk through this tab on the left. You have the play tab. I always think that you should play against other people instead of computers. You're going to learn more. Computers, they're computers. They're not going to play human moves. At some point, you're going to want to play against people anyway, and then your experience against the computer won't be as valuable. Puzzles. This is how you train those tactics that I was talking about. You learn about the forcing moves in chess. You have checks, captures, attacks. You want to win material, lose material, deliver checkmate, all that stuff. You can go into custom puzzles if you're struggling with a certain theme and narrow it down to like, okay, I really need to train pawn end games. You can do that here. So that's puzzles. Learn. There are lessons, and again, that's behind a paywall. That is a membership feature, and I'm more than happy if you do that. It's a great thing. I learned a lot through the lessons that I've done on chess.com, but it's just another tool that could potentially be at your disposal. Here, what I want to focus the most on are analysis and openings. So the idea of analysis is that after each game you play, I really think that you should run through the chess.com analysis to figure out what moves you made that were good, what moves you made that were bad. And then openings are, if you click these are the most common openings where you can learn some of the general structures. And then there's also the explore openings. So let's say that, you were playing e4, e5, and you reach this position, and then here your opponent played something that you had never seen before. Let's say they played this, and it might not necessarily be a good move, but between the analysis and the openings dashboard, you should be able to figure out like, okay, in this position, a master, because we're looking at master games, played d4, and this scores really well for white. So I didn't explain this, but this is the move. This is how many times it's been played. This is how many times white has won the resulting position, how many times it's been drawn, and how many times black has won the resulting position. So between your analysis and your opening explorer, you should really be able to learn and iteratively get better at the game of chess. So I am going to now give my big spiel, right? This is, I would say, the most important way to get better at chess. You are going to make mistakes. I made a ton of mistakes when I got started. The important thing is that you are going to take those mistakes, analyze them, learn from them, and do better the next time. So it is impossible the first time you play a game of chess to calculate everything perfectly, to know everything about openings and everything about every single facet of the game. It's not going to happen. You're going to make mistakes. Just like in life, you need to learn from them and then apply it better the next time that you go through it, and it's going to be fantastic. So I really glanced over analysis. Let's go back into one of my games and I'll show you what analyzing it looks like. So I don't know, let's click this one. So when you analyze it, chess.com is going to give you a cap score, like a percentage of accuracy that you've played. This is the evaluation graph, let's call it, where anything above the line, white's doing better. Anytime you're below the line, black is doing better. So this is the evaluation bar on the left side. A positive evaluation or a positive number means that white is winning, and a negative evaluation means that black is winning. And usually it's related to the number being kind of generally the amount of material that either side could be better or worse. So if the evaluation is +3, that would be similar to the idea of white having an additional minor piece or something like that. More so, the chess.com interface is going to assign each one of your moves one of these subcategories, from the best being a brilliant all the way down to the worst being a blunder. And they're defined here, that's what a blunder means. There's also book moves, where book moves are a conventional opening move. So I'm not going to go through each one of these moves and explain to you why it's the best or why it's an accuracy mistake missed or anything like that. But when I looked at this game and I saw that this was a miss, I had a learning opportunity. I could see that I could have went here and, maybe I just didn't spend enough time. Maybe I didn't see it. Maybe I dismissed it because whatever. But it's a learning opportunity. So that's what the analysis tab looks like. I would say the way that you're going to improve the most as a beginner is to analyze each one of your games. If you analyze each one of your games and you learn something from it, you're going to skyrocket. You're going to get super good at chess. So let's flick back over here. And to cap off the video, I'm going to take you through my first ever game on chess.com. So this is really funny because I had downloaded chess.com out of nowhere. I didn't know anything about it really. I tried to do some research before my first game, but basically I had less knowledge than you guys would have having watched this video. So I was playing with the black pieces, and we got that opening that we were just talking about. It's the Italian game. So it was pretty normal, and immediately I blunder. Move 4, I've already lost material. This square is controlled 3 times by my opponent, and it's only controlled twice by me. The opponent can just take this pawn and enjoy a better position just off the bat. However, they didn't see that because they are also a beginner player, and they forgot that bishops are worth more than pawns. They didn't even move their bishop. So I took it, they recaptured, and immediately after this trade, I'm up 2 points of material. Not bad. So then we keep going. I develop my bishop, and we're going to have that pin that we were talking about earlier. The knight is pinned to the queen, right? So my opponent didn't watch my video, though. So they went knight takes e5, hanging their queen and hanging their knight because that pawn was defended. So I chose to take the queen because obviously that's more material. And then they castled, attacking my bishop. I was like, well, there's no point in losing the bishop. It's attacked twice. It's only defended once. So let me take a free pawn. And then they go here, which doesn't do anything. These squares are defended. So I took another free pawn. They go here, and I finally noticed that this knight is hanging. So I take the knight. And then my opponent resigned because I'm up 15 points of material. And obviously that is enough to typically be decisive. What I say and what a lot of chess YouTubers say is like, when you're a beginner, never resign, because it's perfectly possible that they could hang on their pieces and you could come back, and you're going to learn more trying to defend positions like this anyway. So never resign. But in this case, my opponent did. So in this game, or in this video, we talked about a whole heck of a lot. I really appreciate you guys hanging in there with me. If you learned something, please consider liking the video. If you enjoy the way I explained it, please consider subscribing. I'm trying to make my chess better each and every day. I have a series on YouTube where I'm trying to push to 2000 ELO. And if you want to get better with a community of people, I have a Discord in my description. I invite you to join and grow alongside all of us. So with that all being said, thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you for tomorrow's video of Journey to 2000.